1 in 5 of all companies, so regardless whether they're fast growing, shrinking, 1 in 5 of all companies we surveyed are at risk of a failed immigrations and customs enforcement audit because they do not train hiring managers and staff how to complete I-9s compliantly. So common theme, we talked about this in the last webinar we did on recruiting and hiring. Big spread in the HR best practices between the high performers and underperformers around HR best practices. When it came to compliance, everybody struggles here. So why is it that you think underperforming and the fast growers, why is everybody struggling with I-9 so much?
Because they haven't gotten trained, right? So it's a relatively simple form. And when we did the webinar on this, you and I are like, I know this is going to kind of sound, relatively easy. And why are we spending an hour on it? But it's not that simple of a form. And you should know that by the fact that ICE is coming out and doing audits, and any agency that comes out and doing audits, they're looking for mistakes, right? So yeah, you might learn something from that, but you also are going to get huge fines, right? So you want to make sure, a lot of the organizations that we work with, Mike, will say to me, yeah, we're a construction company. So the first day on the job, the guy might get his I-9 done by his, project manager out in the field, sitting in the truck. The project manager is looking at his ID because that construction worker, may never come to the office or might not come for, a little while. And that I-9 has to be filled out within their first 3 days. And then I'll say, have you ever trained that manager? And they'll look at me, right? And they'll hesitate. It looks like a simple form. It is a relatively simple form. But, you just put white out or cross out, and they're going to fine you for that, which sounds a little ridiculous to you and I. Obviously, it's not to ICE. So they are looking for mistakes. So organizations are making a mistake if they don't train everyone who completes an I-9 on how to do it. That's my next step, right? That's part of my HR assessment. Who's doing the I-9s? I look at them, I audit them. I would say I've been doing this for 30 years. I have never looked at I-9s, never. It's a bold statement, and not found errors. Never.
Wow.
Even with HR professionals in-house.
And can you, so we don't have to rehash the entire I-9 show that we did. Encourage people to hop on the website and watch that episode if they got questions. Just rattle off maybe what are the top, call it 3 areas that people make mistakes with I-9s?
So the first one usually is that they don't complete it within the first 3 days of employment. So that's a big deal, right? They forget to tell the employee to bring the identification with them, not copies, not have their wife get on, a Teams call and show it. It has to be the physical document. Now, we can do that virtually now, and there is some changes out there, but the I-9 has to be completed within the first 3 days. That's the first mistake I see. The next mistake I see is that there are missing areas, right? So they didn't fill in particular areas. A big one is that, the employee has to sign the first half of it, the top section of the first page. A lot of times the employee forgets to sign that or forgets to put the date. These are all finable mistakes on the I-9, and then the crossouts and the whiteouts, right? You can imagine how many times have you filled in a form, say at the doctor's office or something, and you're like, oops, put last name in the first name box, right? You can't do that. You got to start all over. They're not going to accept that, right? So lots, and I'm just going to add expired form. Now, right now, everybody's using an expired form because ICE hasn't come out with a new form yet. But I see forms from, 2008 that employers are using. They just forget to, look for the new updated forms. So,
yeah, I think sometimes people mentally think this is almost like you're filling out a W-2 and maybe they didn't fill it out correctly, but what really counts is that I'm taking the proper deductions from the paycheck because that's what actually matters. I-9,
right.
the actual piece of paper matters, right? So,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Okay, so to kind of recap on section number 1, onboarding. So we talked in prior session, recruiting and then hiring, but day 1 on the job, the best companies, they're doing orientation on mission, vision, values. They are they have a first day checklist, and where am I? I'm sorry. They actually have an employee handbook, but not just have it. They're going through it with their employees, right? So onboarding, you can kind of recap it. It's all about communication and expectation setting, and so
it is.
You can't train and set expectations on processes that don't exist. So the chicken versus the egg, you got to have the processes. You got to be forward leaning in how you think about people in building a productive organization and getting the most from your people. And what are those processes? What are those policies? They manifest themselves in handbooks and mission, vision, values, and checklists. And then the artifacts is your communication vehicle, right? And that's what the fastest growing companies in America are doing. All right.
Yep.
And you got to get compliance right, and everybody struggles with that.